If there really is a next life, are you sure you'll come back as a human? That question left me speechless for a long time after hearing a certain story. A story with no magic, no heroes, just a man who once stood on top of the world, only to fall to the deepest pit of his own conscience. His name was Thac, a man the whole town used to bow down to. He held power, wealth, and the kind of authority that could change the fate of hundreds of people with a single decision. But it was also him who left countless others broke, homeless, landless, and robbed of their belief in basic decency. Thac never believed in karma. He used to laugh out loud whenever someone said, "Do evil and you'll pay for it one day." But one day, Thac woke up in a place with no life, no body, and no one left to call his name. And in that moment, the price he had to pay was no longer just a threat. That was only the beginning. Thac wasn't born poor, but what he always lacked was love. His father was a strict, cold-hearted government official from the old regime who always told him, "Kindness won't put food on your table. You have to win to survive." And so Thac grew up believing, if you want everything, you've got to walk over everyone. By the time he was 25, he already owned his first company. At 30, he had a house in the city centre, a luxury car, and a circle of nervous subordinates always scrambling to please him. But behind the spotlight were the desperate calls begging for debt forgiveness, the elderly clutching petitions after losing their land, the resentful stares that haunted his dreams every night. Thac kept telling himself, "I follow the law. If they're poor, that's their problem. I've done nothing wrong." And yet, the more successful he became, the less he could sleep. His bank account kept growing, but his heart felt emptier by the day. No one called him friend, or brother, or dad, only boss, chairman, or Mr. "Thac, please help me." One night, inside his giant mansion filled only with cold yellow lights and the sound of wind, he sat quietly, reflecting on his life. On the table was a contract he'd just signed to acquire a piece of land that used to be a village school. He sighed. "Funny how the richer I get, the smaller I feel." And that night was the last night he would ever take human form again. Thac woke up, but it wasn't in his lavish mansion anymore. Everything around him was a vast white emptiness. No sounds, no smells, no sunlight. He couldn't feel his body. No expensive watch on his wrist, no phone in his pocket. Just himself, alone. Then in that endless void, an old man appeared. His hair was white as fog, his face kind, but his eyes were so deep it felt like they could see right through a person's entire life. No introduction, no small talk. The old man simply asked, "Do you know why you're here?" Thac froze. He wanted to ask where he was, wanted to respond, but his throat felt paralyzed. The old man slowly walked closer and pulled out a strange-looking mirror, holding it up to Thac's face. But the reflection wasn't of who he was now. It was fragments of memory. An elderly woman clutching her child, crying beside the rubble of her demolished home. A mute boy standing silently by a rice field that had been bulldozed. A man on his knees, screaming in the pouring rain, begging to keep his family's ancestral grave. All of them victims of the projects Thac had personally signed off on. The old man looked at him, his voice calm but sharp as ice. "We don't send anyone to hell. We simply let them relive the pain they once caused." Behind the old man, a giant gate began to open. Mist seeped out, carrying with it a faint metallic smell and whispers, thousands of voices murmuring Thac's name. If you want to know whether you still deserve to be human in your next life, you'll have to walk through that gate. Before Thac could say a word, he was pulled into the darkness. A journey of redemption or punishment had begun. The darkness swallowed him whole. When he opened his eyes, he found himself standing in the middle of a barren field. The sun was scorching. The wind howled past crumbling rooftops. His clothes were tattered, his bare feet pressed against cracked, dry soil. He looked around in panic. The moment he tried to move, a sharp pain shot down his spine. He was no longer Thac. He was now living inside the body of a poor father, one of the very people who had lost their home to make room for one of Thac's upscale urban projects. In front of him sat his wife and child, sharing a simple meal of rice with fish sauce. The skinny little boy smiled innocently and handed over his last bowl of rice, saying, "Dad, you eat." "I already ate." In that moment, Thac felt a lump rise in his throat. His chest tightened, and then a sudden violent noise, the sound of bulldozers, shouting voices, the crash of corrugated metal collapsing. They had come to evict them. He rushed outside, throwing himself in front of the door, screaming, "Wait! There's a child inside. Please, just wait." But no one listened. No one cared. They beat him to the ground. His legs trembled, his vision blurred as he watched his wife scream, clutching their son, running out from the rubble. The entire world came crashing down. He woke up again, but this time he was in the body of an old woman, someone who had just lost the last piece of land she owned to make way for a new road. That land held her husband's grave. He felt himself trembling, carrying the incense bowl, shuffling out into a stream of roaring trucks. No one stopped. No one even looked. A hit from behind knocked him flat. Ashes scattered across the dirt. With frail, shaking hands, he tried to gather the cold earth. Amid the blaring horns and choking dust, he heard his own voice. But it was no longer Thac's voice. It was the old woman's. "Please, just let me keep a place to remember my husband." That sentence pierced him like a knife straight to the heart. The trials kept repeating. He was thrust into the lives of those he had once looked down on, those he had crushed with the stroke of his powerful pen. Every cry, every blow, every desperate gaze felt like hundreds of needles piercing his calloused heart. But the most painful part wasn't the physical suffering. It was, for the first time, truly feeling how deeply others had suffered because of him. He collapsed to his knees, no more tears left, no words to say. In utter despair, he looked up to the sky and whispered through choked breath, "If I could go back, all I'd ask is to be human again, a human who knows how to care for others." And at that very moment, the darkness faded. He found himself once again in that white void, face to face with the gatekeeper of reincarnation. The old man was still silent, but this time his eyes were no longer cold. Thac stood there, no longer the arrogant man of the past, nor the soul who had just endured suffering down to the marrow. What remained was a bare, tattered spirit, finally capable of remorse. The gatekeeper looked at him for a long time. "You've learned what pain is?" the old man asked. "But have you learned compassion?" Thac didn't respond. He simply knelt down in silence. "I no longer ask to be human," he whispered. "I just want to be something that helps people." The words came from the deepest part of his soul. No pride, no ego, no illusions. The old man nodded and smiled. A new door opened. There was no golden light, no sound of angel harps, just a familiar scene, a water well, a hill, and a small house beside a field. You won't return as a human, yet, but you'll live near them to learn again from the beginning, love, patience, and gratitude. And so Thac was reborn, not as a businessman or a government official or a tycoon, but as an old buffalo ploughing the fields every day for a poor farmer, the same man whose ancestral land Thac had once taken away. Under the scorching countryside sun, every quiet step he took was a silent act of repentance. But from those steps, he slowly began to understand what it truly meant to be human. Each morning, in the soft mist that hung over the rice fields, the old buffalo would stand quietly beneath the banyan tree. No one knew it had once been a man, and no one knew that behind those deep, silent eyes was a soul trying to redeem an entire lifetime. The poor farmer, his new owner, had no idea that the animal he now cared for was the very person who had once ruined his family. And yet every time he gently stroked the buffalo's forehead, he would softly say, "You're a good one. I may be poor, but I've never laid a hand on you. 'Cause everything's got a soul, right?" That one simple sentence made the buffalo's eyes glisten. It bowed its head and pulled the plow in silence, like it was rewriting its destiny with every step etched into the earth. This story doesn't have a grand, dazzling ending, because true redemption doesn't need an audience to applaud, and awakening sometimes comes late, but better late than never. If you're still living this life with the chance to do what's right, please don't wait for the next life to learn how to be human. Don't wait until you've lost everything to realize the value of a simple thank you. Don't wait until someone's gone to understand what love really means. And don't wait until you're in pain to finally appreciate the power of kindness. If this story made you pause for a moment, leave a comment. Share it with someone who's rushing through life, living coldly, disconnected from their own heart. And if you too believe that compassion is the only path that truly brings us back to our humanity, hit that subscribe button so we can keep spreading light in a world that so often feels consumed by darkness. Because a person's next life begins with how they choose to live this one.